into campaigns. Florida has a few other politicians that probably need help ousting too. He currently serves on the board of the Apalachicola. I was
That's a
working
tough
on
one, I know.
River. It's a good one. It's a good one to work on. River Keepers, as involved in a progressive nonprofit, and writes a monthly Wild Tallahassee column for the local papers. He almost had more trouble with Tallahassee than that. Chuck Wendig, who is with him in conversation, and actually has words of praise on the back cover of
It's very kind.
Hummingbird Salamander, which are wonderful words. He has his own series of books. Most recent novel that many of you would know is a book that came out a few years ago, Wanders. It's gotten great attention, been a bestseller. He actually has a new little book collaboratively done with an artist from this part of the country, Natalie Metzger, called You Can Do Anything Magic Skeleton. And Karen will have a link to that in the chat. He also has a new novel coming from Del Rey, his big novel publisher, called The Book of Accidents, coming out in late July. So today they will be conversing. Jeff will do a bit of reading, and then we hope you will put your questions in the Q&A portal, especially, or if they come up also in the chat, that's fine. But I think Jeff will, or Chuck will get those out. Two single syllable first names here. I'm starting getting you two a little bit interchanged that way. So for that, I will disappear shortly here now and reappear at the very end, but you'll be in their great and capable hands. We thank all of you again for coming, and you're still coming from all these places. It's great, all over the US and beyond for this program we are delighted to be having. So please now give your good attention and virtual applause to Jeff VanderMeer and Chuck Wendig. Thank you, gentlemen. And Neo.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Thanks to Elliott Bay, and definitely Jeff, thanks for having me here to talk to you. This is a genuine honor. It sounds like a sort of twee question, but and in the olden times it might have felt like one, but I always like to start these things by asking, like, how are you? I mean, that's things are strange right now. So how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm hanging in there. I do think that there's this kind of endurance thing where it seems like it's over, but it's not over, and you have to keep your guard up, because the most tragic thing would be to falter before before it is actually safe for other people's sake too. And so I think that there is an endurance, a mental endurance thing. And then adding in the book tour is quite interesting. This is the experience of doing the virtual stuff. And so I've really been out in the yard probably more than usual. It's like a counterbalance to it all. But I have to be honest, I haven't seen hardly anyone in the last, since last March. And so I know I'm talking more to myself, and I'm talking to other people who are not there. and I think I'm going through the normal kinds of things that everyone's going through. I would also just say that if you don't like the presence of Neo, who has never done this at any of the other tour events, please say in the chat room that you want him to leave. And I'll make him leave.
Pro Neo is my guess.
I will of course be putting a mark by your name, but anyway, hopefully you won't get too involved. And how about you, Chuck?
Okay, like you, I haven't really been seeing anybody, so it's definitely been the type of thing where I am outside as often as I can be. Winter is harder because of that. I mean, winter is beautiful in its own way, but there's not as much going on. But now spring is popping a little more, so it's nice to be outside. And we're in a kind of a birding area, and we have a lot of great nature preserves, Audubon areas,
brilliant.
Good to wander and sort of feel like you're getting away from everything and still not in people's business. How has it been for you creatively? I mean, everybody has different experiences with this, whether it's some people are saying how they're writing a ton and they're getting into this great headspace. And just as many people are saying, like, I'm just staring at nothing.
Yeah.
And nothing is coming up.
I think it's kind of variable. The first thing I had to get used to during the election stress and everything else was this idea of getting frozen and unfrozen and just having a totally different rhythm to the writing, and be aware that I'd get unfrozen, but I had to be patient. But the other thing is that I actually got into writing in part because I just love storytelling, but I also, at the time, I started writing very young. I was trying to escape certain things too. So sometimes the writing is a real solace. So what I wrote a lot. I wrote Hummingbird Salamander. I finished it off during the first part of the pandemic, and I think I was able. Well, I mean, I think I was able to because I was able to channel all that stress into Jane, the protagonist, being more and more isolated and paranoid anyway. So I just kind of like went with that. Like if it had been a different kind of novel, I probably would have been blocked on it and not been able to finish it off and finish off the layering of it. So I lucked out in that regard. But I feel weirdly embarrassed that I've been fairly prolific during this time, mostly because I've been writing a lot right before I go to bed. Instead of reading, I've just been writing on various things that are not under contract. So I've built up a lot of material that isn't under contract, and I still have a lot of other stuff that I have to write. So that's kind of the way my mind kind of copes with these kinds of things.
Yeah. Is there a comparison? Well, actually, first, creatively, is that generally part of your process? Just sort of finding all of these little pieces and sort of just putting them out there and seeing if there's anything there, or is it always like that, or is this the pandemic?
A lot of time it comes to me in fragments to begin with. I mean, I had a pretty intense day job, kind of Lord of the Flies with middle management for a long time. And, it was sometimes 60 or 70 hours a week. Sometimes it was on the road in godforsaken places. So I had to learn to write in short bits, but still be able to put something together that was coherent and had a longevity to it. It wasn't just flash fiction. So I think that's how my process has come about. So usually by the time I start writing, I have about 30,000 words of scene fragments and bits of dialogue in book order that I've typed up into a Word document from handwritten notes. And around 30,000 is when I know it's time to write.
Right. Okay.
So
the Hummingbird Salamander is fascinating to me, and it's one of the things that I use as an example, telling people how, for lack of a better term, authors are really kind of the best authors are kind of their own genre. Like Hummingbird feels different from your other books while still being intimately and explicitly a Jeff VanderMeer novel. Where does this come from? It's silly to ask where your ideas come from, but this book specifically feels
right.
Personal and intimate in a way, as much as it's also sort of pointed outward. It's inward too.
And you'll have to forgive me. Neo just tried to end the Zoom session, so I think I've got your question, but I had to stop him from doing that. Much as we never stop him from doing anything around here. Well, I mean, this one's actually kind of mysterious. Usually, it starts with a character, a kind of charged image, an idea of the ending, and then some, like pivotal scene in the middle, I know, before I start writing, or before it starts forming, and then I start writing. But this time, I think there was something conjured up by that very first part where it says, assume I'm dead when you read this. And then it kind of goes into this weird limited second person that isn't really second person, but kind of like draws the reader, implicates the reader. And it almost felt like a summoning to me in a strange way. I don't know how to like a sorcerer or something summoning something uncanny. And so I kind of went with that throughout the whole book. So there's this limited second person from time to time that kind of directly addresses the reader. And so that was one part. The other part was I did have this idea of somebody holding this hummingbird and it looking tiny in their hand, which it would for anybody, but it gave me this idea that the person holding it was a very large person, a very formidable physical person. And immediately I knew it was a woman. I knew that she was an ex-wrestler. I was thinking of some of the women athletes that I've known over the years, and especially when I was like playing sports in high school and college. And and then also, gym experiences I myself have had, because the only thing I can keep doing, although not during the pandemic because there's no gym, is just lift heavy stuff. I can't really jog consistently. It's just like if I can lift something heavy, then eventually, something good happens, and then something bad happens too, possibly. But anyway, so these gave me like little anchors and insights. But then there was something beyond the physicality, because I was writing the scene as like a proof of concept, which was Jane. After she's gotten this piece of taxidermy from this dead eco-activist, is pursuing the mystery, and she's being pursued at one point after she's found the dead eco-activist journal up this hill. And I felt like it was a pivotal scene for some reason, and it stuck in my mind. I couldn't get it right to save my life. And she and in an early version, she just kept walking and trying to get to her car. And then suddenly I realized that she's going to turn around and haul off and hit this guy. And I thought that was interesting because yeah, it speaks to her physicality, but it also speaks to something else, because the guy could have had a gun, any other kinds of things. So it's not just about the physicality, it's an attitude that goes with it, that comes kind of to the fore the farther the novel goes along. So those are the kinds of things that came up. And then once I had the idea of Hellmouth, one of the antagonists, then things really began to kind of come together, I think.
Yeah. Jane is interesting because she, like you said, the book has this sort of second person-y thing going on, where it's both talking to the reader and, as you say, kind of implicating the reader to some degree in the both the plot and the consequences of the book, while at the same time Jane is both anonymous but very explicit, this sort of hulking figure, and she's very dominant. And you have this great ability to psychologically dissect other people and conversations in the book. They feel chess matchy. They feel there's a scalpel. Are you a people watcher? Do you or is this all in your head? Like,
no, I do, and it's kind of something that I feel I've been cut off from, obviously, during the pandemic, because one of my like if I was on a book tour, one of my favorite things to do would just be in New York or Seattle or anywhere, is just walk the streets, find, just say, hey, this is my end point. If I can't, get it all the way back, I'll take a cab or something, but just walk an area and just get a sense of it and the people in it. And I mean, like, my YA novel, Peculiar Peril, this will sound really strange, actually came out of a conversation I heard misoverheard in a pub in Vancouver Island, where somebody said to another person, do you know squishy? And what they were trying to say is, because they were taking a second language course, do you know what the word squishy means? And I realized that later, but at the time I didn't realize that, and that became something fairly pivotal to one of the characters in the novel. So sometimes it's just something overheard. Sometimes it's little bits. It's the same thing I think a lot of writers do, but I need that sense of being like kind of isolated at the same time I'm around people. I don't know why that works. It works sometimes for writing too. Like, I would write in bars if people didn't come up and bother you drunk. Why are you writing? What are you writing?
What are you writing?
Yeah, kind of spoils the ability to do it. And at one point in one novel, I did just write down what the guy was saying to me, because I was writing the scene set in a bar. So
putting it in here. Congratulations.
That was for shrieking afterward, but anyway, so I've lost my train of thought. Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, like, do you get into these heads? You get into the feeling.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah, the sort of combativeness between people, the uncomfortable truths that are sussed out as Jane is talking to people, talking to their coworkers or some of the antagonists. You feel that there are psychological truths in there, and there are uncomfortable truths. And arguably, this book is very much about some uncomfortable, maybe, truths about us and the world in which we live in our relation to it.
It's funny because I do think she's insightful in that way. At the same time, there's kind of a darkly absurdist thing that I have in there, where she, in addition to that, she says these truisms that I'm not sure are actually true. Like, very, very, very close into the very beginning, she says something like, if someone hands you something, you kind of reflexively take it, you think about it later. And I know that that's what Jane would do, but that's exact opposite of what I would do if someone tried to hand me something. So at times, because of where she is in the novel, I feel like the truisms are part of her trying to make sense of how she got in this deep with this thing. Though, of course, as soon as she takes the hummingbird, it like sets off alarm bells somewhere. But then also the thing I did is I really method acted secondary characters this time. And I always think about them anyway, but I thought in a thriller mystery format, where basically a character is trying to get information out of people, if I don't fully think about the motivations of those people, even the minor characters, I'm going to wind up with a situation where things are too easy or not quite the right, the right thing. So,
this is one of those books where, for lack of a better term, it's a message book. I mean, you're trying to say something to Jane, through Jane, these interactions she's having and the mystery that she's following. It feels like a descent. All of your books to me have the feeling of descent. You're descending into something, but this one feels something altogether more real. I mean, what do you see in the world around you where you want to write this book? What are you trying to say? I mean, without trying to be like
Right.
preachy or critical, or
Yeah.
you're there.
Well, I mean, there's several different things. One is to make a point about the beauty of the world around us and how that has an intrinsic value. I think it does to Sylvina, the dead activist, that goes beyond anything else, or is very important to her at least. But I think also, and that is fading, and that as that fades, we fade, and we don't seem to realize that. I think I wanted people to think about what it means to have the two creatures in that book, a hummingbird that takes this long migration, that's very perilous, and this salamander that is so pervious to damage through its skin. Because I think there's things in those that reflect stuff about us too. It's just we don't think about it. We don't think about the fact that we're absorbing all of this damage from our environment because of the things we do, because usually it takes like a decade or more at least for it to manifest, right? So there's those kinds of things. I think also we are facing a point where we're going to have to make some pretty big decisions about how things are going to go in this world if we're going to survive this, and if the wildlife and the habitats are going to survive it. And the longer we delay with that, the more like authoritarian those things are going to be, or the more potentially really harmful they're going to be. And so I thought the book could be a laboratory for ideas, without doing too many spoilers, that are large in scope and maybe not things that should be done. But I kept talking to these environmental activism classes that were incredibly frustrated that the goalposts had moved. Like, you can't take photos outside a factory farm, you could get 10 years in prison for that. All these activist things, the BLM thing we've seen, where all these states are passing these laws. It's like, and for the environmental cause, it's like they were reduced in these activism classes to talking about things like unveiling a banner at a Republican convention, which is very performative, and they probably don't care. So I thought, a book can be a laboratory to talk about these kind of dangerous ideas without endorsing them, so to speak.
I have some follow-up questions. Do you want to do? I think you're going to do a reading from the book.
Yeah, I can do a short reading for sure.
There.
From fairly close in at the beginning of the novel, because as you go further, I really do think there's just too many spoilers, and I think it's still too early for that. Someday I'll just read the whole ending. But so Jane gets to this storage unit. She's been given this key by Sylvina, and she goes inside the storage unit, and this is what happens, or the office for the storage unit. Inside, gold wallpaper had turned urine yellow. The red carpet perked up as it ran past two ornate antique chairs. Beyond that lay a fortress outpost in the cramped antechamber, a barred cage jutting out, and a counter painted black, from behind which a woman watched me. Beyond that lay the storage units through an archway. What do you want? The woman asked, no preamble, as if I might want almost anything at all. What do you think? I said. Showed her the key as I wiped my shoes on the crappy welcome mat. Which one? 7. Got ID? I've got the key. Got ID to go with the key? I've got the key. She held out her hand. Identification, I'll check the list. I considered pushing a 20 across the counter. That idea felt strange, but it felt strange to let her know who I was, too. I handed her my driver's license. She was much younger than me. She had on a lot of black, had piercings, highlighted her eyes to make them look bigger, and wore purple lipstick, practically a uniform in some parts of town. She might have been a brunette. I remember her expression, bored, bottled up here, doing nothing, and I wasn't making her life less boring. I've come a long way, I said, which would be true soon enough. I would have come a long way. If you're on the list, great, she said, finger scrolling down a single sheet of paper with names printed impossibly small. Yes, that'd be great, I said, struck by how meaningless language can be. Yet I remember the conversation, but not her face. The woman found a line on the page with a ballpoint pen, gave me back my ID. So go in then, she said, like I was loitering. Where? Over there. She pointed to the right where another door waited. I stared at her for a moment before I walked through as she picked up a magazine and ignored me. Somehow I needed a list of life choices that had led this woman to be in this place at this time, to take my ID, to ignore me, to be sullen, to be anonymous. I wouldn't see her on my way out. The cage would be empty, as if no one had ever been there, as if I had emerged years later and the whole place had been abandoned. All those rows of doors, so many doors. What did I know about storage units? Nothing. I'd only known our mothers, a place we'd rented to appease our father, who didn't want to become a hoarder. But just maybe, if you drove all the way to the outskirts of a city, to the edge of the mountains, what you kept here you wanted at arm's length. And what you wanted kept at arm's length could be precious or fragile as memory, even a bad memory. 9 through 11 followed 1 through 3. Had I missed a passageway? A moment of panic at the thought of getting lost as I kept walking and didn't find number 7. But I found the right door, or the wrong door, depending on your point of view. It was all meant to be is a powerful drug. Crossing that threshold into Unit 7, I couldn't have told you what was preordained and what was chance, or how long it might take to separate the two. All I saw at first was the emptiness of some squared, stripped down cliche of an interrogation room. A modest wooden chair stood near the back, under flickering fluorescent lights in the ceiling. A medium-sized cardboard box sat on the chair. I stood in the doorway and stared at the box on the chair for a long time, left the door open behind me, an instinct about doors slamming that wasn't paranoid. The trap could be anywhere. It was so still, so antiseptic inside, except for one moldy panel of the back wall. I don't recall dust motes even, like a crime scene wiped clean. But I checked the far dark corner, the ceiling, before walking up to the chair. I did that much. Just an ordinary cardboard box. The top flaps had been folded shut, lightweight when I gave it a nudge. No sound coming out of it, no air holes, nothing like a puppy or a kitten. Immense relief in that. I put down my purse, pulled back first one flap and then the other. I think I laughed nervously. But there was no moment of misunderstanding, of recoiling in horror. A tiny bird perched down there, sitting dead, taxidermy. A hummingbird in mid-flight attached by thick wire from below to a small pedestal. Frozen wings, frozen eyes, iridescent feathers. Beside the hummingbird, I found a single piece of paper with 2 words written on it and a signature. Hummingbird Salamander, Sylvina. Oh, Sylvina, thank you. Thank you for not scrawling "find me" across the bottom of your note. Thank you for knowing that wasn't necessary.
Before we get to the question I want to ask, I'm looking at the Q&A, and Samuel Montgomery Blinn asked a question that I guess appropriate to this. He said, you both use a kind of fragmented sentence style. He's like, for you, what does this style of prose do for you when writing, and what effect on the reader are you looking for? Which I think is an interesting question.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for one thing, it's something that you do see, or some proximity to it, in noir fiction and of a certain type. Not necessarily every thriller, but the kind of, like, you know, down at the luck gumshoe kind of fiction, I think, is where you find that. And I've used it before in Finch. I used a lot of it in Finch, actually, in a different way, actually a little more cut up. Part of it in Finch was because the characters becoming more and more basically getting PTSD from their situation. And so I felt that also supported that aspect. In fact, one of the most horrifying parts of my entire career as a writer is at the last second, the publisher of that book had a different copy editor come in and give me a revised manuscript with all the sentence fragments made into sentences.
Oh,
and
no.
There was no way at that point to just go back to what I had done. I had to recreate a lot of what I had done before. So it's brave of me to try it again, but But there is
that's
there's
a horror
also
novel right there.
right, but it has to do a lot of other things in this novel because there's other things going on with regard to the plot, the kinds of descriptions I need. So so it's kind of not as intense as with Finch. I think it helps with interiority. It takes away I this, I that, and kind of again like the second person, modified second person, kind of like puts the reader in the place of the character more specifically. But there are rules to it. So I'll read just one paragraph to show what those rules are. I did and didn't enjoy air travel back then. The quiet, cool cocoon, the ice in the glass just so, the smooth camaraderie of seasoned travelers broken only on occasion by the person to whom it was all too new, the freedom to be alone, to think alone, the spotlight from above that pearled the scented air, pointing at only the important things, the sense of being motionless once at altitude, outside of time, outside of history, even with weather delays. In first class, you could almost forget the world was fucked. So basically, it starts out with a short sentence, a longer sentence, and then it begins to go into sentence fragments, and then it kind of comes back together with another complete sentence at the end. And I think there's an interesting rhythm to it too, that helps the book. And it's something that the next novel is going to be completely not like that. Drone Love is basically based on opera and arias, and it's going to have a totally different pacing to it. So
yeah, I think you're right. The rhythm as you read it is clear when you do it.
Yeah.
It's not broken up so much as it's just sort of strung together.
Yeah.
So my question as to sort of what we're talking about in regards to the book, the first question was like, this whole thing is how are you? But then like the question I want to ask is how optimistic are you? I mean, the pandemic, but then also, pairing it with, how we need to react and how we need to change the way we are to be better for ourselves in the world. And the pandemic sometimes gives us good examples of that and some very bad examples of that.
Yeah.
Then this book, like how optimistic are you in general?
It's hard. I'm kind of like on the fence right now because I was hoping we would take more lessons away from the pandemic because it is kind of part and parcel of the climate crisis and kind of a test run for things that are even kind of harder to kind of grasp in an abstract way in terms of the policy decisions we make. And so, it's been good to see things like in the Tallahassee community, people come together and do the things necessary to survive this in a rational way. But then at the state level, it's been a complete mess. And so those things kind of make me less optimistic. I think the optimistic part is that we know what we need to do. The pessimistic part is that part of what we need to do is change the systems that we're working within. And I see less evidence of that. I see it, even in green tech, I see that, solar farms are becoming more extractive as more investors become involved with them. They care less about where they're put. So you see more cases where people are having to try to save forests that'll be cut down. And this kind of weirdly ironic thing where, yes, we need to fight fossil fuel companies, but we should be able to say the word solar without it being problematic in any way. And yet it's becoming so. So it's almost like we have, this thing in front of us we have to face. And then at our rear guard, we have this other thing that we need to protect against happening too much of. Otherwise, we're not going to have the headwind or the momentum we need to get where we're going. The good news, again, is we know what we need to do. We just need to face up to it.
Yeah, there's always that issue if everything just becomes another industry.
Right, exactly.
Some people believe that that's the way forward, but of course, industries are, like bacterial cultures. They just want to make more of themselves at that point, and so just change everything in the wrong way.
And I don't think it requires a utopian fix on that small part. I think it just requires better regulation and planning for that part. For other parts, we need systemic reform, but that should be easy to fix if we just pay more attention to it.
Right. So. And on a obviously part of the issues we're dealing with is that sometimes we're told that this is purely an individual crisis and that you just got to do your part to recycle. But at the same time, there are individual things you can do. And certainly you're, I think at this point, well known for rewilding your backyard. Actually, someone asked a question about that. How ambivalent have your neighbors been on your rewilding efforts, and are you expanding your ravine creep? Actually, if you could just talk about that in general, like
Yeah.
how's it
Yeah.
going, and what have you learned from that?
Yeah.
Both
Well, I mean,
creative-
I guess one reason that I don't even talk about recycling is because there's so many absurd contradictions in it. Whereas when I talk about rewilding, I feel fairly confident that I'm talking about something that someone can do on a tiny budget or no budget in certain circumstances. So first of all, I don't feel like it's like me talking about having to rewild, having the resources to rewild a half acre intimidate somebody from doing or whatever. I know I'm very privileged to be able to do that, but it can be done on a small scale. I even just had this article in Esquire about how you could rewild your balcony and you can help. I mean, I had a guy who just put one pot of wildflowers on his balcony in Atlanta and was just overcome when he saw this hummingbird on migration come in and use it, and maybe that's what got that hummingbird through Atlanta. You'll never know. So that's the thing that really appeals to me. And then the other thing is that I think focusing on something like that in the moment really helps me at least stay unfrozen on the larger issues, because otherwise it's really easy to get frozen at the enormity of the issues and also beat yourself up about things that are actually connected to systems that we need to change. So those are the things that I really appreciate about the rewilding, and it's actually going really, really well. I mean, we have rufous-sided tuis in our yard, which is a bird that requires leaf cover, that requires a certain kind of scrub habitat, doesn't always do well in an urban environment. There's indicators like that all around that we're doing the right things. The neighbors, for the most part, have been, some have been encouraging, like John Fowler, who's also an author, who's our neighbor, has been incredibly encouraging and is, does stuff in his own yard. Some of our other neighbors have been incredibly encouraging, and others have been kind enough to be neutral about it, which, is fine, because it's not something that I expect other people to, I'm not trying to convert them. I just simply want to make sure that there's no harm coming from other yards into my yard, that I'm not going to start, planting a plant or bringing an animal in because of what I'm planting that then suffers harm because I can't control what's going on beyond my yard and kind of the easement area.
Do you feel that there's is that the first best thing someone can do, just because it gets them invested and involved? And
it has been for me. I mean, it could be a different thing. Like that led me into the local politics thing, which I'm trying hard to be more involved with, because literally here, if we can flip one more city commission seat, we're going to have such a better chance at climate resiliency, at social justice and everything else. So hopefully people see how important local politics can be on all of these issues. Yeah. And they're things where you really can make a difference, especially in a town like ours. It's still like 250,000 people, right? So it's a relatively small city. So this, you can make a bigger difference in that context, I think. So it could be anything, but the rewilding is what led me into these other things. And so I guess the main thing is just simply, if you can find something that in the moment is of use in some way, it doesn't matter what the scale is, whatever it is that keeps you unfrozen, that makes you connected to the issues, I think is really the thing that I think makes sense.
So, I mean, that's like optimistic. You know what I mean? I don't.
No, I mean, I am actually by nature optimistic. I wouldn't write. I would have stopped writing if beyond the fact that I need to eat. But I promise you, I'm not just writing because I need to eat.
Neo also needs to eat. So
right, Neo needs his scrambled eggs in the morning. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely be blocked if I didn't have some kind of optimism. And I think part of it too is that there is no point of no return, because there's just simply levels of damage, right?
Yeah.
And it feels presumptuous as somebody who's been able to escape the effects of climate change to this point to some degree, to talk about pessimism, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one of the great things you do too to kind of carry that torch is sharing all the stories on social media. I mean, social media is a nightmare. It's a nightmare realm. So to have that it punctuated by even just visuals of a bird that people maybe haven't seen before. I know birding has become kind of huge, if occasionally a little invasive and intrusive from people during the pandemic. But do you have like a bird that you just, when it comes to your yard, you're so happy, or something you're hoping?
Yeah. I and then also I find it hilarious that there are now I've gained like 30,000 followers since I started posting nature photos. There are definitely people following me who were like really surprised to find out I was a writer and that I was going on this book tour, which is great actually. But considering I thought I would lose followers, and then people who say things like, his books are so creepy and uncanny. And then I go to his Twitter feed and it's like, here are 6 kinds of raccoon and and a possum that I'm hand feeding ice cream. I mean, that's not what I do, but but in terms of the birds I love, I do have to say that the summer tanagers have a kind of I don't know what it is. It's like they won't get too close, but they won't get too far. They seem to always know where they are in the space-time continuum in a way some of the other birds don't. Like I've never had a summer tanager even flip up against a window, for example. And we have bird proofed our windows, but back when we were still doing that, that was never the thing. They knew where they were for some reason. And the way that they look at me, I don't know why, but there's just this kind of appraisal that's quite interesting. And I may be reading that in, but I'm quite fond of them.
Yeah, I find that we have scarlet tanagers here, no summer tanagers, and they do. They're different, and they're the first bird that I was able to pursue, like in a way that I can hear it and I know it's somewhere, and to sort of track it through a forest and find it, and then to find it sometimes, and then it'll simply it comes from the canopy high up, and then it'll land at a branch near you, and it does have that regard of where it cocks the head at you and just like see something there. So
But is that your that's not that's probably is that your favorite bird, or what is your favorite bird?
Yeah, because it was one of the first sort of first times I was exposed to one of those birds that felt not that they're not all truly honestly magical. I mean, I love some birds like the Carolina wrens and titmice are just some of my favorites, but it was the first time that I felt like that reward of having seen something unusual and having we used to have a high acreage, and to be able to support a bird like that and to bring a bird like that in,
that's cool,
just because of where we were. It was really neat.
Yeah, and I would say that with the summer tanager, it is a very distinctive call. So I always know where they are in the yard in a way I don't with some of the other birds. So maybe that's also, there's that connection because I know where they are. So
yeah, there's a fascinating call and response that comes with birding. I guess let's get to some of these questions here. Zach Brinsenhoff asks, do you have any suggestions for a reading order of your books? And also he's looking for the New Weird anthology. He says he can't find it.
Yeah, I think New Weird is out of print now. Seems kind of apropos of something. And as for the order of the books, I mean, it really just depends. If you want, there's different things with regard to the different books, like Annihilation, if you want that kind of strange adventure into the unknown. But also with that series, it's really about characters who are fairly isolated, so if you want something warmer in a way, than Borne, with its kind of parent-child relationship, and with characters who are really trying desperately to connect, then that'd be more your thing. Those are the 2 entry points usually for my writing. I feel like I should selfishly say Hummingbird Salamander, but it just depends on what your thing is. If your thing is more reality, then definitely I think Hummingbird Salamander. And if you like complicated characters that are not necessarily likable but interesting, I think that Hummingbird Salamander or Annihilation might work.
Yeah, they're both and Hummingbird Salamander in particular has, I think I said to you, it has a David Fincherian quality. There's that sense that you're seeing something sort of clean, and you're watching a clock move, and you're watching gears turn, and you feel kind of like you're being drawn into something. It's fascinating.
It's interesting that you say that, because, and I don't know who David Fincher uses as a cinematographer, but I was thinking about the look and feel of some of his films when I was writing Hummingbird Salamander. I was also like taking directly from certain films, like True Grit has this amazing, the Coen Brothers remake has this amazing long shot in the dark. I don't know how they lit it, showing this kind of gun battle with people on horses. And I was struck by the fact that most directors would have done that up close, but how amazing it was to see that while they're watching from the hill. And so there's a scene in Hummingbird Salamander, that's my translation, where Jane is watching this used car lot, and to her surprise, somebody starts firing, but then all the people in the car lot also have guns, so they start firing. That to me is like the one Coen Brothers moment in the book.
Great. Let's see. Aubrey Dickens asks, I really want to know what you think the most absurd thing is that you've ever written. Interesting.
Most absurd thing. Well, Crap. That's a good question. The most absurd thing. Well, I mean, I have to say that Peculiar Peril, the YA novel, which uh thankfully, it sold solidly, but I think it's been misunderstood in some quarters. Because it has things like happy decapitations. Like there's one character who's decapitated like I think 6 times, but keeps coming back and everything's okay. So I think Peculiar Peril has the most absurdity because I was absorbing all these bizarre fairy tales and folk tales before I wrote it, where all kinds of things like that happen, and it's very cheery. It's weirdly cheery throughout. So there's stuff like that in it, and This World is Full of Monsters on Tor.com is the other one. Where I thought, what if I followed this guy who's colonized by aliens, and he wakes up 100 years later, and he's kind of like involved in like this alien life cycle, and I'm just not going to give any indicators about that. I'm just going to do it. And I wouldn't do that as a novel unless I wanted to commit career suicide, but I figure I could get away with it in a 10,000 word piece, and that would be the other one.
But you're not. One of the things I really admire, you don't feel like a person who's super concerned about the career suicide thing. Like you take big swings. No, I mean seriously. Like that's not an insult. Like you nail it every time.
No, I appreciate that.
Other people would like pitch you those things, and an editor would be like, "Yeah, no, like no, what are you doing?" You do it, and it's sublime and amazing. And every
well, thank you. That's very kind of you. I think I've been very fortunate, but then also when Annihilation landed with FSG, they really, my editor there really does think about like the long term. And so, like even with Dead Astronauts, I was like, look, this is another contract. If y'all don't want to publish this, I totally understand. You've been so kind. And yet they found a way to publish it very well. So, I've been very fortunate about where I've landed. Before that, like the Ambergris series, 3 different publishers for a trilogy, which is like the kiss of death.
Yeah, right.
I'm very lucky that they sold as well as they did because really I should have never had a career after that. But so there is that, but there is also the thing that I can't really, I can choose like between 3 different projects I'm passionate about, but I can't write something that I'm not passionate about.
Yeah,
so
that's wonderful. Anonymous attendee, which is a very fancy name. I'm always curious about the numbers in Dead Astronauts, the 3, 7, 10, and all the versions. Can you tell us what they mean?
That's a good question. I got to remember some of the stuff that you layer in, you don't necessarily remember. Like I think that's actually from Gnostic or Kabbalah significance. I'd have to go back and look, but it definitely was meant to kind of resonate in that way. And the numbers did refer to different like combinations of characters and things.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like if you don't know what it means, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like there's certain things that the reader needs to know, and other things that if they don't know and it's just mysterious, it's not going to affect how they perceive the plot.
Yeah, I think sometimes the best world building and mystery at that level, at that sort of granular level, are things that don't have answers.
Yeah.
Because that's what entices people to fill in those gaps.
That's my entire career, apparently. Yeah.
Nailing it. Jeff Bradley, novel lengths are important to editors. When you begin a project, do you have a target word count up front, or do you let the project dictate its own length? Also, do you have an opinion on a general target word count for novels today?
I really don't. To the second question, I mean, Annihilation, don't tell anybody, is I think about 53,000 words tops. Yeah, so maybe a little shorter than that. And honestly, I feel like the fact that it was a paperback and that short was one reason why it got reviewed so much. It's like easy in a sense, given the volume of books people get. But yeah, so I don't think it really matters. I do know that like Kim Stanley Robinson, and he said this publicly, he has like a word count that he has to hit for some reason. I don't know why. But I think more and more it kind of dissolves, that has been dissolved a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong, but so they're all over the place. Like Hummingbird Salamander is 100,000 words. Authority was like 85,000. Borne was probably close to 90,000, 95,000. So.
Yeah. So I mean, relatively, they're trim compared to some of the more epic things that are out there. So
yeah.
Yeah. No. Good. Samuel Montgomery Blinn asked a question that I didn't realize. He said you've both written in universe. Jeff, for Predator. Did you write a Predator book? I didn't know that.
I did. Predator South China Sea.
Really?
Yeah, the Predator spreads all these invasive species from other planets because he's so slobby. And there's a scene where I thought for sure they'd cut it, but I was just like, let me see if I can put a scene in there where he's just like burping and yawning in his control seat, waiting for something to happen. And they left it in. I mean, it actually had some relevance, but but it could have been cut. And there's a guy who turns into fungus.
You VanderMeer predator.
But the chapters are all really short. It actually taught me a lot about how to pace things differently than I had before, and I use that for Finch. To some degree.
So it's pre-Finch.
Yeah, it was one of the first things. Brian Evanson, who was doing an aliens novel, I was like, I had just started becoming a full-time freelancer, and I was like, I could use a gig. And he's like, would you like to write a Predator novel? And I was like, yeah, I actually would. And then I was like, the Bible's going to come, and it's going to be this huge ass thing, and it was 2 pages, and I was so relieved. And then when I read about you doing the Star Wars stuff and 1,000-page Bibles and stuff, I was like, my God, this man, how I can't. I mean, how do you absorb that much material? I don't know.
Anything for the first Star Wars book?
They didn't. Okay.
No,
okay.
Literally nothing. Not a page.
Oh well,
we just
that's
have these
great.
weird surreptitious phone calls, and they whisper like planet names at me, and I would have to discern.
Seriously?
Like an oracle. Seriously, they wouldn't tell me what they were. Just so
you never had a Bible? I must have been misreading that.
No. Okay. I did, like when I did some later stuff like the comics. Then it was.
Okay. Then maybe that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
So this person asks, is that something you're interested in pursuing more in the future, or do any particular are they franchises that are tempting to you? Would you?
Well, I mean, I co-wrote a Halo novella for an anthology, which was pretty interesting because my co-writer knew Halo and I didn't, but I knew the basic framework, and I liked the basic idea of Halo, but I can't play video games because I get so obsessed and I would never get any writing done whatsoever. So I've had to I actually got a problem with my wrist from playing Angry Birds, and Anne had to take the device away from me. Okay, so if you can imagine a more complicated game, so I can't even play Angry Birds anymore. So I really would like to, but I don't trust myself. But anyway, yeah. So I could see an opportunity where I might want to write in another universe like that. Sure.
Nice. Okay.
But I must say, it did give whiplash to my readers because I wrote Shriek and Afterward, which is the sprawling, non-linear family history, which, to some people looks like it has no plot. And then I wrote Predator South China Sea, and they were like, what is he doing?
Yeah. You're just going wherever you want. That's what matters. God, I can't believe you wrote a Predator novel. That's crazy. That's good stuff. That's a good piece of trivia right there. Zach Brinsenhoff asks, we've asked what kind of bird you'd be, but what kind of lizard would you be? Do you have any opinions on your lizardness?
Broad-headed skink.
Broad-headed skink. Is there a reason for broad-headed skink, or you just...
I just think they're badasses. I just like them.
It's just your soul speaks to that. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Samuel Montgomery Blinn asks, written for younger readers with a peculiar peril, is there a worry about dumbing down your writing, or is that a wrong way of thinking about writing for that audience?
I think that would be the wrong way to think about writing for that audience. I didn't think about that. I did think about the joy I had reading certain things as a child and a teenager. What were the and I was like, can I do something that's absurdist but also kind of like has a call out to that, as well as the fairy tales I've been reading for our anthologies. So
let's see, McKenna Princing. I love the air of mystery and constant discovery woven through Annihilation. How do you decide what to reveal to readers and when to maintain mystery but not create unnecessary confusion?
Yeah, I think that initially Annihilation had too many red herrings, but then also I was able to solve that problem when I realized how paranoid the Southern Reach secret agency was. So suddenly it was like, oh, I'm assigning this to them. And so by the time I'd finished Annihilation, I had a much better idea of the secret agency behind them. So that was one way that I did it. The other thing is that I realized very early on that the characters could never find out everything about Area X, and that it would be really annoying for something about encountering the unknown to have a final scene where they kind of get together in a lounge or something, and they're like, well, I figured this out, and it's blah, 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 blah. So sometimes it's what the character can know. And since I knew they couldn't know it, I knew I needed to complete the character arcs rather than the story arc, if that makes any sense. So. Did
the characters come first for that, or did Area X sort of manifest for you?
I think they came kind of at the same time in this case, which is unusual. So usually it's one or the other.
Nice. Pamela Fitzpatrick asks, is there a genre of writing that intimidates you? Presumably to write, not just on the shelf scaring you.
I don't know what that means. Just, I mean, I read everything. I mean, what would intimidate me? Writing a Chuck Tingle novel.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what the answer to the question is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fair. No, that's fair. CZ Wright, what is your favorite thing you've read in the past year? That's a good question.
Well, I just finished reading Alexandra Kleeman's novel that's out in August, Something New Under the Sun. I thought that was pretty great because she finds this way of this guy's journey to Hollywood while the wildfires are going on to write a climate crisis novel that's extremely serious, but also hilarious in the absurdities that occur to him while everything is burning down around. So I think it's a really fascinating thing, because I think it's so hard with like the apocalyptic and dystopian kinds of novels to get the full range of emotions in there, which we know is happening, but as a novelist, it can sometimes be difficult to do that. So
yeah, I think with so many books that come before it in that pattern, it's so easy to see that and sort of lean on it, but to do something different, to sort of embrace that spectrum, I think is wonderful. I'm excited about that. What's next for you?
That's a good question. I finished I have a what now?
Besides sleeping and not zooming.
Right. Sorry, I was disconcerted because the squirrel, it's the time of day when the squirrel starts gnawing on the deer antlers right above my head on the deck. We did that because they were gnawing on the house. If you give them deer antlers, or basically a deer skull is what it is. Anyway, so the next thing I'm doing is the second Peculiar Peril book, which predictably is called A Terrible Trouble. The decapitations have stopped, but for those who have read it, Ruthless, which somebody just said on Twitter, was like, this is where Borne wound up. This Ruthless is Borne's mother or something. But anyway, the absurdity does continue in this book, and the antagonist is still Crowley, who now has the DNA of a moth who was also Charlemagne, and he can fly because he has moth wings now. Sorry.
Said it out loud,
and there is an academy which will allow me to make some pointed comments about academies that wizards go to, and also do some interesting things, because it's going to be a brutalist influenced academy of wizards. All the architecture is like Soviet brutalist, but it's in England, in a remote part of England. And anyway, so I'm having some fun with this. So that's the next thing I'm working on.
And you've got another adult novel coming out. Do I have that right?
I have there's an adaptation I forgot in September that Theo Ellsworth, a comics writer, did a graphic novel based on my short story Secret Life. Oh. And that's coming out in September from Drawn and Quarterly, and that's pretty. He did an amazing interpretation. Like, I didn't have to write a script. Like, I gave him the story. I was sure he would come back and say, "I like this. Could you write a script?" No, he just came back with the finished thing that he'd done in his head, and then he'd drawn it. So I'm like, great. This is how it should go. But I am working then on an adult novel called Drone Love, which I'm excited about, because it includes these giant monsters that escaped from biotech operas of the future, in this very decadent future where they actually sing through their skin, the arias, the cells are actually singing, and they can't turn it off while they're awake. So you hear the aria, this beautiful aria, just before you die, because they're so deadly that even though you can hear them coming, you're still probably not going to survive. And some of them are from like comedies and things. So the music you hear is extremely hilarious, really, and jaunty, So that's one aspect of the novel, but one that I'm actually pretty happy about. So
no mushrooms, hallucinogenic mushrooms. You're sure?
No mushrooms. Yeah, no magic mushrooms for me.
Natural VanderMeer. Are the squirrels still chewing on the bones, by the way? Is that?
They just stopped.
Yeah, we get that. I had a squirrel drop a deer scapula on my head from a tree.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it was actually we had there was a tree that got struck by lightning in our last house, and the tree blew the one side of the tree off, but kept it contained. But then we had to cut the tree down because it died. And when they cut it down, the center was hollow and it was stuffed with bones.
Oh, that I remember, but I don't remember it falling on your head. That was
Well,
amazing.
and that was the thing. That's when I learned that squirrels chew bones.
Yeah.
So I think that opened the vault of bones. So I would walk up and down the driveway and take these walks. And then at one point, like a scapula just whacked me on the head. And I was like,
Honestly, Chuck, you've had an experience very few people have had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that going to get into your fiction at some point, or has it already? Okay.
It's my version of Hummingbird Salamander. So squirrel leads me on a quest. Let's see. Do we have any more questions? Yeah, there actually are some good questions here. We've heard a lot about your economic justice work. This is from Jesse Haman. How has social justice impacted your writing? How has social justice affected you personally?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's something here in Tallahassee that is inextricable from the environmental stuff. I mean, they just raised a small African American community to basically build a wastewater pond that they said was going to help another African American community avoid flooding, even though there's absolutely no evidence that this will be the case. They may seriously damage another community of that nature just to put in a senseless new road to the airport, which, you know, we're not an international airport. You have to go to Jacksonville or Atlanta from here. And also there's already a road to the airport. It's just because the legislatures in the House and the Senate here in Florida don't want to have to go a more circuitous route. They want a more direct route. That's basically why they're building it. So, you know, the things that we're involved with here at the local level are all about social justice. And there are some amazing community leaders here who are kind of leading the way. And I'm just trying to do my part in the ways that I can do my part. So it perfectly makes sense. And then, you know, the other thing I would say is that Hummingbird Salamander is the experience of a white woman in Jane. And so that is necessarily something that, you know, has its limitations with regard to that issue. And so it's something where the character is going to kind of dictate, you know, what you see of those kinds of things in the intersection. So the next novel is not like that, Drone Love. And so there'll be more of that intersection in it.
Good deal. Let's see, Jason Pengelly. There was an article on the writing of the Southern Reach Trilogy where you discussed how the terroir of the setting seemed to really affect you personally. Has any other writing had such a significant effect on you personally?
Like
your own writing or other people's writing?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I don't know.
I think I would just say that Rachel Carson's writing about nature has definitely been a big influence, just in terms of, and then very eccentric nature books sometimes where they have very interesting moments that are unusual. Sure. I'm just reading right now Jonathan Mayberg's The Most Remarkable Creature about the Caracas bird of South America.
I bought it on your
yeah, there've been moments like that in this book where I've just been kind of blown away. So
yeah, the sort of the heart and detail that go into that book is pretty amazing.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Big fan. Your works helped me secure my MA in literature. I think you've touched on this before, but what are your thoughts of using the weird as a vehicle for progressive movements opposed to how it was traditionally used, i.e. Lovecraft?
Well, I mean, the thing is, and people don't believe me when I say this, but, you know, Anne read Lovecraft for the anthologies that we had to put Lovecraft in, which was the weird. And she was basically looking for the least racist story possible, to be absolutely blunt. And I have never connected with Lovecraft to the point where I haven't read most of his work because I keep bouncing off of it. And no one believes me. They don't believe me that there's this parallel evolution where I could just study like squid and fungus and things like that in the, you know, the weirdness of their life cycles and get to a point where there's these seeming parallels. So I never felt like I was writing in reaction to that, although I was aware of that. And the more we researched, you know, that period and everything, you know, there was some other crap going on, obviously, too. So I just try to like bypass it and write my own original stuff that comes from my own point of view, which I hope is progressive. And then it's just simply changed by who the characters are, you know, and their own beliefs. So.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Lovecraft is obviously he's not He's not a space alien. He came from Earth and sees these things that we can see, and so there could be
Yeah.
parallel
And
evolution.
I think it's great that there are people who have like taken that and made it something new and different. That's just not the thing that I do. So
You do, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's good. This is good. Thank you for this. This is wonderful.
thank you.
I mean, do you have more events coming up? Are you doing a couple more virtual? Mini-
Actually, I'm doing an event with Nebula Award for the Bay Area Book Festival, and that's going to run, I think, May 7th.
Nice.
And other than that, I'm now transitioning over to being the in conversation partner for other people. So I'm doing with Jonathan Mayberg, where I guess ostensibly we're also doing Hummingbird Salamander, but really I just want to ask him a bunch of questions about Caracas birds,
Right.
things like that. So
cool. I think that's it. Does anyone else have any more questions? We have a couple more minutes, I think, but otherwise, I don't see any more here.
Okay, all questioned out.
We're all questioned out. I think we're good. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks to Elliot Bay for having us. Thanks.
It's great to have a chance to talk to you. I mean, I know it's more of an interrogation in a sense, in a nice way, but it's approximating a real conversation,
sort of
like
real,
in a bar or something.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we'll actually, this thing will die back one of these days, and we'll actually see each other in person.
Right.
Wouldn't that be a wild thing?
Yeah, I know.
I think we'd all look forward to that. Because you've had great audiences in Seattle, Jeff. People there, and
you're such a great bookstore. I mean,
I
every time I go into your bookstore, I spend so much money, and I find so many things I didn't know existed. Like last time, Frank Moten, who I didn't know existed, I bought all his books because there was prominently displayed on a shelf. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And as we wind this down at what is still afternoon here in this part of the country, and it's turning into evening where you are, and the various birds in all of our parts of the continent are doing what they do. It's a rainy, drippy day here, so it's been a little quieter on that front here. But thank you both. This has been great, and enlivening, enlarging, and educating for various parts, and a lot of good stuff, serious things, but also fun things too. And Neo sort of got quiet. I don't know if Neo
he left.
Okay.
Once he couldn't stop the Zoom meeting, he decided to not be a party to it.
Enough was enough. There was a lot of chat for him, for Neo, and a lot of other affection in the chat too, along with the questions. So thank you all. And as many of you know, many of you already do know, this Hummingbird Salamander is a marvelous and wonderful book, and has been going into many hands and will continue to do so. And we look forward to the future books. And Chuck, also your forthcoming book, the Book of Accidents, we look forward to coming in July. So
yeah, I love being there.
July. Oh wow. Okay, I thought it was okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, time means nothing anymore to me. I don't know when anything is happening. It's all a blur.
Anyway, thank you, both of you. Take care. Good luck with everything, with books, with our political things, the world, being safe and all that. So thank you everyone who's been with us all of this wonderful, delightful time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming out.
Take care. Bye-bye.